The Middle Class Bill. India's middle class is hurting from rising inflation and rising prices, with taxes contributing to a good part of it on both sides. Taxes are reducing consumption power, and first on income tax because of high income taxes or relatively high, and second, obviously, on goods and services, the taxes that we pay, the GST that we pay on everything we buy or we consume. The expectation is obviously that there will be some SOPs in the upcoming Union Budget 2025 to be presented on February 1st. New Indian Express columnist Shankkar Aiyar points out that the persistent food price inflation, now at about 8% over a year, has shrunk the purchasing power of middle-class households. The slowdown, which he says was visible by mid-year and signaled by this column in October last year, has been validated by data. So the steep decline in second quarter real GDP growth to 5.4%, with echoes in the first advance estimates of GDP growth for the year at 6.4%, reflect a slide in consumption and in both public and private investment, according to him. On the other hand, state governments are spending over 4.7 lakh crore rupees on subsidies, including 2 lakh crore, that's 200,000 crore rupees just on cash transfers to women. So the expectation is simple. The tax-paying middle class believes it deserves a share of the taxes collected, or at least lower taxes. And what are the chances of that happening, of taxes coming down? All of that, of course, depends on where the middle class sits in the political calculus. So I reached out to Shankkar Aiyar and asked him what was the political calculus looking like going into the union budget this year.
There's an interesting election happening in Delhi, which has a large middle class. Arvind Kejriwal has presented something called the Middle Class Manifesto and stuff like that. There are two answers to this question. So essentially, the urban middle class or the middle class doesn't form a large enough constituency for political parties to get concerned about. Although theoretically over 150 or so seats are in urban India, but they are not consolidated. The second part is that the middle class is not organized. There is only rage, outrage and everything. So for the government, all the anger of the middle class, the counter to that is, okay, where will you go? Who will you vote? And there is also Brigade of Faithful. So a large part of the middle class believes in Hindutva, and so they will continue voting with BJP. So it's not like BJP will be alienated in its vote bank or alienated from its vote bank. But after Lok Sabha 2024, and now that we are facing an interesting election in Delhi, there could be some sort of passing showers on the middle class in the budget. By that, I mean now that we have 3 slabs, we might have 4 slabs. So 10, 20, 30 might become 10, 20, 25, 30, or 10, 15, 20, 30. So let's get the math right. All said and done, if everything goes according to plan, if the economy grows by 6.5%, if the revenues grow as much as they grew this year, and if the economy sort of chugs along, then based on that mathematics, the government has roughly about 90,000 to 1 lakh crore to play around. Now, who is a more important constituency? Forget about growth and all that, okay? Is it the rural class, the bottom of the pyramid, the voting class, or is it the middle class? If they have money to spare, they would address the schemes to the voting class. I mean, there's an economic reason also. If the middle class says the inflation has hurt them, surely that problem visits the rural and poor people also and probably hurts them more. Same with unemployment. I mean, the magnitude is much more for them. So the government will have some schemes for them. What the middle class hopes for may not come through. I mean, there's a very interesting conversation I had with a youngster last week, a conference where he said, will there be a cut in income tax? And I said, what would satisfy you? He said 18%. I said, that's a very precise number. How did you arrive at that? So he said, they're charging me 18% GST on everything. I want an 18% rebate, which was all very logical and everything. I'm not sure the government is in a position to do that. Not unless they let the fiscal deficit slide a bit or reduce the target. Instead of 4.5, they say, oh, we'll touch 4.7 or whatever the math. So A, the government has a constraint of money. B, it has to choose between 3 outcomes. 1, stimulate growth through infrastructure, construction projects and stuff. B, it pays or stimulates the rural economy through some schemes in the farmers and stuff. And COK gives the middle class some kind of lollipop. So this is never going to be happy. I mean, whatever it comes, it will come between 30 and 50,000 per year. That would translate to not much money. So whatever the tax cut comes, it's not as if the middle class is going to run and buy the next house or the next car or anything. So the stimulation of consumption, I mean, there's plenty of literature on how tax cuts do not necessarily result in consumption, right from George Bush's tax cuts to Trump's tax cuts. There's a lot of literature there.
So that's the cuts part. Let's look at some of the more fundamental issues, which is obviously income, and there's also inflation. Not that the budget can come up with any magic recipe for this, but how are you seeing this?
There is paucity of data on this. But let's look at the white collar, middle class job landscape. So, over the last 2 years, how does this play out? Parents borrow about 20, 30 lakhs and send their children to either an engineering college or a management institute to get an MPA. But as we both know, placements in both these categories have been poor over the last 2 years. So there is a family which has educated somebody, and that person is waiting for a placement or a job or whatever. So the first 4-5 months, the family says, okay, we'll get it, we're getting there, we'll do something or the other. But at some point, the family is also servicing that education loan. So they start to cut down on other expenditure. So that's one play that is happening. The other play is the peer effect, I call it. So if somebody in the neighborhood has lost a job or somebody is not getting a job, all of that starts playing into your mind. So what's happening with the middle class households is urban wages have not risen. In fact, in some cases, they're in negative over the last 4 years. The second part is that the food price inflation has hit them hard, and that food price inflation has visited several of their cost factors like education costs, medical costs, transport costs. So these are the major expenses for the middle class. So middle class is squeezed. I mean, politically speaking, there are the rent reapers and the rent seekers. The top of the pyramid is the rent reapers, which is the rich and famous. And the bottom of the pyramid is the rent seekers because they are wooed by political parties with various schemes and stuff like that. Stuck in the middle is the middle class.
So, if you were to now look at the blueprint, I mean, as things stand, of what the budget might hold, so you're saying that if there is anything, it'll be more indicative or perfunctory for the middle class. We will continue to see more giveaways for the more disadvantaged sections of society, like we've seen in the case of the freebies, as the numbers that I mentioned, which you had computed. And the well-to-do, I guess, will be left alone because they're already taxed at a level where it's tough to go beyond this.
Yeah. So one other factor that will play into this is that the government may not be able to grow its taxes the way it grew last year. Because of the stock market, the capital gains, the IPOs and stuff has got a lot of this personal income tax being higher than corporate tax, and some of that will start slowing down. And what do you reap out of capital gains if the market is going down? So that's one side of the story. To me, I think the best the middle class can hope for, and hope is like the clouds, some bring rain and the others just pass by. So the best the middle class can hope for is a little adjustment in some of the rates and some of the, it's like easing of the belt a notch here and there, and just hope that the budget brings in growth. Practically, this is what the government has been telling the middle class over the last 5-6 years, that we are giving you growth, we are giving you metros, we are giving you airports, we are giving you highways. So be happy. All those selfies that we see outside the Atal Setu and the Vande Bharat trains, and there's excitement about this Vande Bharat with sleepers and without sleepers. All of this is, the political parties know that the middle class is happy with all of this. They're not too concerned. I mean, their calculus is that the larger vote bank is the poor and oppressed class, the bottom of the pyramid. So the politics is a playbook of C.K. Prahlad. What C.K. Prahlad said, there's gold at the bottom of the pyramid. Politicians have discovered the gold, so you have all the freebie schemes and everything, and everybody is sort of focused on that. And you look at the manifestos in the last three elections, Maharashtra elections, Jharkhand elections, Haryana elections. Nobody gave a sort of tuppence for what the middle class was thinking. It's only now that the growth has slowed down and the rupee has slid and all those issues. So suddenly there is a feeling, okay, maybe these guys, this child is crying a lot. So let's sort of address this part. And the irony is that Arvind Kejriwal, who started as like the middle class anti corruption messiah or whatever, and that story is gone elsewhere, he has presented this, and he is known to be voted in by the bottom of the pyramid of Delhi. So he has put out this middle class budget, and that has kind of shaken up the system a bit, and there is a lot of conversation about this. But the best case scenario for the middle class is probably a little few adjustments and grand stories about Viksit Bharat and probably hope for growth.
Shankar, thank you so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure.